Alright, so now we're going to be taking a look at some operations with radicals. So when we're doing operations with the radicals, the first thing that we need to remember is simplifying all the radicals down before we start most operations. So, and then we're going to combine like radicals. So I will talk about that as we are going. So in example 1, so write each expression in simplest form. So we have 5 square root 2 plus 3 square root 2. So for us to be able to add or subtract radicals, they have to have the same number underneath. So they both have a 2 underneath, so they are like terms. So 5 of these plus 3 of these equals 8 of these. So we get 8 root 2. So we don't do anything with the square root underneath, we're just adding. Just like when we add variables, we don't change the variable. So now this one, 3 square root 2 plus 8, square root 8. So we cannot put these together as they stand right now, but maybe we can simplify. Can't simplify 2, so let's see if we can do root 8. So we have square root of 8 would go down to, we know we can change that into 2 times 4 underneath the square root. So if we did 4 times 2 underneath, we know that we could do the square root of 4 would be 2. So we'd have a 2 root 2. And we're adding a 3 root 2. So now they are like radicals. So now we could add 3 and 2 together and get 5 root 2. And then the third one, so we have 5 root 3 minus root 12. So again, we have to break this down. So we can do 4 times 3, and we know the square root of 4 is 2. So that would be 2 root 3. We're taking it away from 5 root 3. So 5 minus 2 would be 3. We get 3 root 3. Alright, go ahead and pause and try the checkpoints. Alright, so you should have gotten, we have a 2 root 5 and a 7 root 5. They are like radicals, so we can put those together. So we get 9 root 5. And then this one, 3 and 27 are not alike, so we break down the 27. So we can do 9 times 3, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So we get 3 root 3 there. We're going to take it away from 6 root 3. So we end up with 3 root 3's. And that's your answer. Alright. So same idea here, but this time we're dealing with the negative roots that we had, or the square root of negative numbers we had yesterday. So 3 root 3 plus a square root of a negative 9. So remember, we have to take that negative out and it becomes I, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So we get 3 I. And now we can not combine these. These are not like terms. So remember, we have to have a square root of 3 in both terms to be able to put together, or we could put like i's together. So if both of them had an I, we could put those together. So now this one, 2 root 2 minus, so 18 would break down into 9 and 2, and we could do the square root of 9, which is 3. So we'd get 3 root 2, and then remember that negative would come out and become an I. So again, we cannot put these together. These are not like terms because the second term has an I in it and the first one does not. So we have to leave it like this. Okay? And now this one, we go, well, I want you to pause and try it, just checkpoint. So 5 root 7 and root 12. So we subtract, this breaks down into 4 and 3 and a negative 1. So square root of 4 is 2. And square root 3. And then that negative came out and became an I. So this should be your final answer. Can't put these together. Alright. So let's take a look at multiplication. So multiplying radicals. So we multiply the coefficients and then multiply the square roots together. Okay, we have to keep them separate. And then we're going to simplify afterward. So multiplying these two together, all we're going to do is we're going to do 3 times negative 2. We're going to get a negative 6. And then we do 10 times 18. So we get 180. Okay, so we could go this route and then break down the 180, or we could back up and go simplifying them first, if possible. So the 10 does not simplify. So we get 3 root 10. And then we still get, we're multiplying by, and I'm actually going to write this a little differently. I'm going to put it in parentheses. So 18, square root of 18, we know that's 9 and 2, and we could do the square root of 9, which is 3. So we're going to pull that out. And we get the 2 here. So it makes the math a little easier. So 3 times, we know that negative 2 times 3 in here would be negative 6. So 3 times negative 6 would be negative 18. And then now we can do the roots. So root 10 times root 2 would be root 20. So instead of dealing with 180, we're dealing with the square root of 20. So we know that we can break this down into 4 times 5. The square root of 4 would be 2. So when we pull the 2 out, it has to multiply to the front. So we're doing 2 times negative 18, which would be negative 36. We still have that root 5. So that should be your final. No matter what route you take, this is where you want to end up. Alright. So again, we can go ahead and simplify this root 8 if we want, or you can just go ahead and multiply it through to start. It doesn't matter. I'm going to break it down. So we know this would break down into root 2. Now we can multiply, so we're going to distribute in. So root 3 times 7, that would be 7 root 3. And then root 3 times a negative 2 root 2. So we're going to do 2. Root 3 times root 2 is root 6. And we need to check that these cannot be broken down afterward, and 3 and 6 cannot. So this would be your final answer. And now the last one, again, I'm going to simplify root 8 into 2 root 2. And then we go ahead and multiply these together. So first term into both of the second 2 terms here. So 5 times 3. 5 times 2 root 2 would be a 10 root 2. And now the second one into both terms here. So 2 root 2 times 3 would be 6 root 2. And then 2 root 2 times 2 root 2. So we get 2 times 2 on the outside, that'd be 4. And then we get root 2 times root 2, and we talked in the other part A, that anytime we multiply a root by itself, we get the inside number, and we're going to multiply these together because this is all multiplication here. So let's clean this up a little bit. So we get 15 10 root 2 plus 6 root 2 would be 16 root 2. And then 4 times 2 is 8. And then we can put these together, 8 and 15. So 8 and 15 is 23. Plus 16 root 2. And that would be your final answer. So that's it for the multiplication. Now we need to look at dividing. So we're dividing terms with radicals in them. There's really two different types that we're going to look at. We're going to have the first type here with just a radical on the bottom. So that's going to be similar to what we did in the other video. So root 2 is on the bottom. We want to get rid of it. Okay. So we're going to multiply both the top and the bottom by root 2. So remember, if we do that in the bottom, root 2 times root 2 would just be 2. And then we're going to get root 2 times both of the terms in the top. So root 2 times root 8 is root 16. Now, of course, we could have wrote down the root 2 to start and then dealt with it that way, or we just go ahead and here. So minus root 2 times root 2 is 2. And we know that root 16 is 4, so we get 4 minus 2 is 2 over 2, which is 1. All right. So now we have a little bit different. So on the bottom we have multiple terms. So to handle this, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by pretty much the bottom, but what we're going to do is we're going to change this sign between the two terms. So we're going to make it a negative. So I'm multiplying by 4 minus root 2. Okay, so it's called the conjugate. So multiply the top, so 4 times 4, 16. 4 times negative root 2 would be negative root, or 4 root 2. And then 4 times 4, 16. 4 times negative root 2. So that's going to be negative 4 root 2. And then we have to multiply the second term in. So root 2 times 4 is a positive root 4. No, sorry, positive 4 root 2. Sorry, it's early in the morning, guys. And then root 2 times a negative root 2 would be a negative 2. So now we'll go ahead and clean this up. So the top pretty much stays the same. We can't really do anything there because they're not like terms. The bottom, we notice the middle terms cancel. So we get 16 minus 2 would be 14. And I'm going to do one more thing. If we notice, all of the terms can be divided by 2. So we're going to cut all those in half, so we get 8 minus 2 root 2 all over 7. And that would be your final answer. So now the last one, multiply by 2 minus 2 root 7. So the top, 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times negative 2 root 7 is negative 6 root 7. And then root 7 times 2 would be a positive 2 root 7. and then root 7 times a negative 2 root 7. We get negative, so the 2 stays. Root 7 times root 7 is 7, so we're going to multiply that to that negative 2. And we'll clean it up here in a minute. All over 2 times 2. 2 times negative 2 root 7 is a negative 4 root 7. And then 2 root 7 times 2 is a positive 4 root 7. And then 2 root 7 times negative 2 root 7. So we have a negative. We get 2 times 2 is 4, and then the root 7 times root 7 is 7. So you might have noticed a pattern that anytime you multiply a conjugate by the original, this middle term is always going to cancel out. So that is why we multiply them by the conjugate, so there's no more square roots in the bottom. And I'm going to go to another line here. So let's clean it up. So 6, so we have this at the end, we have 2 times 7, so it would be a minus 14, and then the 6. So we get minus 8. And then negative 6 and 2 would be minus 4 root 7. All over. These cancel, and we have the 4 times 7 at the end. So that is 28. So we're subtracting 28 from 4. So we get a negative 24. Okay, so now these can all be reduced by 4. So let's go ahead and do that. So, and then we have all negatives, so we could take the negative out. So we have, well, let's just handle the 4 for right now. So negative 2 minus root 7 all over negative 6. So the negatives, if all of them are negative, because we could pull the negative out of the top out to the front, and then we have a negative on the bottom, so we know negative divided by negative is a positive. So our final would be 2 plus root 7 all over 6. That would be your final answer. All right, so go ahead and pause and try the checkpoints. We can wrap it up. All right, so hopefully we multiplied the top and the bottom by 1 plus 4 root 2. Okay, and so root 3 times 1, root 3. Root 3 times 4 root 2 would be a 4 root 6. All over, so 1 times 1 would be the 1. We know that the middle term is going to cancel out, so this, so the 1 times the 4 root 2 and the negative times the 1, that's going to cancel, so we don't have to worry about it. So now looking at this, negative 4 root 2 times 4 root 2, that would be a negative 16 times 2. And cleaning it up, root 3 plus 4 root 6 all over, so 2 times 18, 2 times 16 would be 32. So we get 1 minus 32, we get a negative 31. So that would be your final answer. You could take the negative out of the bottom and then distribute it into the top, but we can just leave it. Now the last one, which is the easier of the two, because we only have the radical on the bottom, so we're going to multiply by root 2, or root 12, sorry. So root 12, the bottom, that would just be a 12. And then root 2 distributed into the top, we get 3 root 24. again, we could have simplified root 12 down and then multiplied, but same result. So 6 and 12, so 6 times 12 would be 72. And now we have to simplify our radicals to see if we can put them together. Alright, so 24 would break down into 4 and 6. Our 72 would break down into 36 and 2. Okay, so trying to, well, root 4 would be 2, so we get 6 out front, root 6. And then 6 root 2. All over 12. Root 6 and root 2 cannot go together. Don't be fooled with the 2 6's out front. It has to be the radical that has to be the same. And then all these can be simplified by 6. So we get root 6 plus root 2 all over 2. Alright, so that's it. Let me know if you have any questions and we will continue on.